How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez and Lance Storm. Figure 4 Daily, September 7, 2018. Figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. I have much to get into here today. Lance has got a lot of thoughts on everything. You've been here a lot of late. You did the Figure 4 Daily show. You did the NWA show. Almost got you in for the Retro Show Tuesday, but then you ended up doing the show. And then today, lots of opportunity to hear you.
Yeah, I'm glad Vinny did the Retro Tuesday. That's my favorite show, and he's far more entertaining than I.
Well, let's entertain the people here today, Lance. I was talking very briefly.
Are we audio entertainers, Brian?
No. We're... Actually, I don't even know what the actual term is. You know what we are, Lance? God damn it, we're wrestlers.
Yes, I am for sure.
Yeah, what do you mean? Get out of here. So... on Observer Live, talking about the Mae Young Classic, but everybody had to call in about a bunch of other different things. So we didn't spend a lot of time on it other than just the overall, it was okay. Some was good, some was bad. Not a blow-away show or anything like that. What were your thoughts on the Mae Young Classic?
I like the presentation. I think WWE does tournaments well. I thought the opening packages and stuff was great. I really had a lot of issues with commentary. I know you talked about it, I guess it was with Vinny last night, but a lot of what they said seemed like counterproductive or dumb things to say. You know, the opening match with Nixon Newell and Zahara, whatever the name was, you know, when they talked about her being a 10-year veteran, more than 10 years in the business with over 180 matches, I was just like, do you even think what you're saying? It's like, that is so few matches. It's like, this is not a plus. I think
it was 12 years.
So even worse.
They later said over a decade, but I believe the exact number they gave at one point was 12 years and 180 matches.
Yeah. When I worked for Otto Vaughn's the first time in 93, that was my first busy schedule. And I had 120 matches in 5 months. So the thought of putting her over as a veteran with so few matches over so many years, I just like, how does this help anybody? And they repeated it twice. And then one of the other things that you didn't mention, it was a line in is it Lacey Lane? The really short girl that was working with Craven.
Yeah.
They showed Lio Rush at ringside. And then they mentioned that Lio Rush has actually wrestled this girl and said that she was one of the hardest hitting people he's ever been in the ring with. And I'm like, she's playing the David role in David Goliath with this woman, and Lio Rush thinks she's the hardest hitting person he's ever been in the ring with? I was just like, what are you thinking? It's like, none of this stuff is getting anybody over. And it's just frustrating because on the whole, I liked the show. It's the first round. You know, you're not going to have blowaway matches, and you're probably not even supposed to. You know, you've got 4 matches in an hour, so, you know, you get about 6 or 7 minutes each. It's an introduction, and for that, I thought it was good. I thought Nixon Newell looked good. I thought it was too early for her to be selling the knee injury already in this tournament, unless she's being eliminated in the next round, which I don't believe she is.
Well... you'll see where that goes.
Well, I again, spoiler alert if you haven't. I know she gets injured. I don't know if it's in the next round or the one after that. But, you know, is her knee so bad that she can't get through one match without being near crippled? It's like you have to put injuries behind you. Now, if you wanted to put over the fact that after 2 matches in the tournament, 3 matches in the tournament, whatever, finally someone managed to tweak her knee and it's like that's why she got eliminated, great. But unless her gimmick's going to be this chronically injured lame duck with one wheel, having her sell her knee the first time we see her, I think, is a negative. And then there's something else, and I'm probably the only one that thought of this, but the fact that she has an unprotected, uncovered metal knee brace on her knee and is doing a Shining Wizard as a finish, it's like, why is this not being addressed? If this was a real sport, it would be. she's got a metal thing strapped to her knee, and her finish is she's kneeing people in the head with it. Now, I realize she needs the knee brace, but, you know, JBL used to wear a big metal knee brace, and he'd cover it with a neoprene sleeve, and it's like, why not have her cover it up and have the announcers just acknowledge that, you know, the refs or the authorities or whatever have checked, and it's like the brace is covered enough and padded that it's no harder than a regular kneecap would be, so she's not hitting people with what, for most part, would be an illegal foreign object that she's strapping to her knee and kneeing people in the head with. Again,
not only that, but if she actually did that, and if she ever gets signed and turns heel someday, pull the damn knee pad down behind the ref's back, and you can use that as a weapon.
Yeah, and also, too, you've got to have the concern of, what if she catches someone with this brace? Remember the time Rey Mysterio did a head scissor and gaffed somebody really bad with his knee brace?
Yeah.
So that concerned me, but I thought she looked good. She had good charisma, and the match itself was fine. I liked...
Hey, let me jump in first before we keep going.
Absolutely.
When I go back to the announcers, I think, and I'm not forgiving Michael Cole because I think he sucks, but, and really, even though this kind of sounds like an offense, I mean, he should work harder. I think the issue is there's a lot of girls, especially in the first round, that Michael Cole has no idea who they are. He doesn't know anything about them. And so he probably went up to them before the show, and he said, tell me a few things about yourself. They just told him a couple of things. I've had 180 matches. I've been around, over a decade. He wrote this shit down, and then he's in there, and he's got like a 7-minute match. He's got to call the action. He doesn't know anything about the girls, so he has nothing to say, so he has to go back to his list of things that he asked him before the show. So all he can come up with are these facts that he should never say. And if he knew anything about the girls, he wouldn't have to say these facts. But because he doesn't know anything, he has to go back to that. I presume that's what happened here.
It could be, because he repeated himself on several points quite a few times.
Yeah, he's got like a tiny list of things that he knows about everybody, and he has to keep going back to it because he doesn't know anything about them.
Yeah, it's like the Rhea... Is it Rhea Riley? Rhea
Ripley.
Ripley. Okay, I draw a blank for a second.
Charlotte.
Yeah, and that's funny because... like, it's something that I never would have thought on my own. Like, other than they're blonde, taller than average, more muscular than average. It's like, I don't see any comparison, but once you put that seed in your head, it's like, now maybe people will, and it's like, I don't think that'll help her. And I'm bad for that, but I'm not getting paid to commentate. I do this to my friends all the time. I'll be watching Raw or SmackDown or whatever, and I'll see something. And I'll point it out to them, and I get an angry text back with, I'll never unsee that now, thank you. And I think that's what Michael Cole did with this Charlotte thing. It's like, once you say, oh, she doesn't want to be Charlotte too, she wants to be her own person, it's like, why are you creating this comparison that's not going to benefit her when I never would have thought of it on my own? I think she did actually quite well.
I don't think anybody would have thought about that on their own. Does anybody on the planet think that Rhea Ripley reminds them of Charlotte? I'd love to hear from you if you're one of those people.
She's blonde, a really good athlete, and taller than most of the other girls. It's like that. But I've told you this story before, and it was obviously it wasn't Michael Cole, but when again I was in OVW in 04-05, and they sent half a dozen girls down to me to train for 2 weeks and assess. They were going to hire some new women, and Angelina Love came down, and she had the tight blonde cornrow braids at the time. And I was really high on her. I thought she looked great. She could talk. She could work. And I strongly recommended they hire her. And I was told by someone that Angelina Love just reminds her too much of Jazz. And I remember saying, it's like, do you mean the short, stocky black woman we employ? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, how the hell does Angelina Love remind you of her? And he's like, well, it's the braids. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure she'll take out the braids. And I'm guessing if you could confuse Jazz and Angelina Love, you could confuse Rhea Ripley and Charlotte.
You could confuse anybody.
Yeah, I liked the Rhea Ripley match. I think MJ Jenkins has a lot of charisma and was really fun.
Yep.
And I like Rhea. I worked with both these girls when I was down at the PC. And she's got a really strong presence and a great athlete. I think Rhea's got a lot of potential, and I think MJ too, because she's got charisma and she's fun to watch, which they know they love in WWE.
What about Miko?
Oh my God, she's my favorite wrestler now. She was so good. And I took a photo, and I think I sent it to a couple people. I think even posted it this morning. When she put on the STF and applied it properly and extremely well, because that's one of my pet peeves with the John Cena STFU, or whatever he calls it now, being, shall we say, a worked version of the hold. And she put it on really great with a nice cross face and made it look like it actually hurt somebody, and I was popping huge for it. And then she goes and uses the Death Valley driver, the attitude adjustment, if you will, as her finish, and also does that much better than John. I was just like, man, this girl's technique is so much better than John's.
Well, it's an example of, on the main roster, it's more important to do... How can I explain this? They don't require you to do the move in such a way that it looks real. They just want you to do the move. And that's it. Whereas, she was 16 years old when she started, and she's been doing this for, 22 years, if my math is correct. And she makes it look real. And that's a requirement. I shouldn't say it's a requirement, but that's the way things work in Japan. And that's certainly not the way that things are expected to work in WWE.
Yeah, and also, too, in John's defense, when you have to do it to guys like Kane and bigger guys...
They ain't going to bend.
They're not going to bend.
But you know what? Some people do bend. So to me, it's like, put it on real to anybody that you can. And if you have to make some sort of adjustment for somebody who doesn't bend, then you can make your adjustment there. But you don't have to put it on everybody and make it look like it's not real.
Yeah, but the attitude adjustment in particular, it's like John lands everybody very, very flat and safe. So it's a very friendly hold, if not nearly as impressive looking as Miko's was. And there's actually a lot of moves like that were invented in Japan, looked really good and got over, and then guys started doing extremely safe versions of them here. Sort of like, not that Jericho's was unsafe, but the Lion Tamer back when he was working with cruiserweights in WCW looked really great because he jacked guys up on their chest and put their knee in the back of the head. And so many people asked, like, why didn't you do that when you went to WWE? And he's like, guys didn't bend like that in WWE. You can't get Kane into that position. It just doesn't work.
Any other comments on the announcers?
Yeah, and this isn't a shot at any one of them individually. Like yourself, I'm not a fan of the three-man booth, but I just find, and they did it once before on SmackDown, I think, when they had, so they have Michael Cole and, Tom Phillips. I really find it difficult when, actually there's been a podcast that I found the same way. It's the Team Tiger Awesome guys, because I don't know them well. When your voices sound close enough and you don't have a distinct personality to go with you, I don't like when I have to try to figure out who said that. And I find with Beth and Renee, they're both very pleasant, well-spoken announcers, but I can't help but think if one of them just said everything the two of them said, it would be the same. And then I don't think it helps that there's three. And same thing if there's two guys or three guys, or two of the three guys sound a little bit alike. I find it confusing when I don't know who's saying what. And that's where, like Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, you could never confuse the two of them if you'd never met them before and just sat down and listened to them. And, Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura, Gorilla and Bobby, any great announcing duo or trio has distinctive voices and personalities. And I don't find that of the three of them, there isn't really a distinct personality. Obviously, we can tell Michael Cole apart from the two ladies, but I'm left with not a distinct flavor to my broadcast team, where if you had Nigel and Morrow and Beth, or Nigel and Michael Cole and Renee, there'd be three distinct personalities, three distinct voices, and I just think it would be a lot easier to follow and would serve the product better.
You want to hear my 3-man booth or 3-man and woman or 3-woman booth theory?
Sure.
All right. My theory, I mean, for years WWE had a 2-person booth, and it worked out just fine. And over the last decade or so, or however long it's been, they've needed 3 people in every booth. Why do we need 3 people in the booth?
I don't know.
I'll tell you why. I think. Because in the old days, you had 2 announcers, and they called the action and they talked to each other. That's it. Just like we're doing right here. Nowadays, you got people in their ear either yelling at them or talking to them or sending them information to tell to the people, etc. Okay? I think that the theory is if we have 3 people in the booth, then you can talk to one of them in their headset while the other 2 can continue to carry on a conversation. Whereas if you have 2 people in the booth and you're busy yelling at one of them, and meanwhile the other one is trying to talk to that person at the same time, the other person has no idea what they're saying when they come back to the real world, and you've got this weird moment where Jim Ross, for example, could say, "What do you think about that, King?" And King's like, what'd you say? See what I'm saying? So I think by having a 3rd person in the booth, you can always have 2 people interacting while the 3rd person's being yelled at or told to say something.
That makes sense. I don't think that helps the product necessarily.
It doesn't help the product. It's terrible. But that's why I think that they have that. Because of the change to being yelled at constantly in their headsets. You've got to be able to have 2 people that can still communicate while the 3rd person's being yelled at. So at any moment, there's never, I got to tell JR something for 30 seconds. And meanwhile, Jim Ross can't even communicate with the guy because he's listening to Vince.
Yeah, it would certainly make it easier to take direction from the back if that's your goal. But
the goal should not be to take direction from the back.
No. Cyrus did a really good podcast with Jim Ross last week, I think, and they talked about announcing. And one of the big things that he said he learned from JR, and JR, I'm assuming, learned from Bill Watts, was the importance of laying out. Like, sometimes you just need to
shut up.
Yeah, just shut up, for lack of a less politically correct term. But yeah, to let the action in the ring speak for itself. And I think with a 3-man booth, if the 2 of them are talking long enough, that 3rd person wants to get their shit in, so to speak, because you feel obligated to talk. You're out there. So there aren't those moments where people lay out and we just get to, absorb the action because there's always someone talking. And I know when... sometimes when Otunga used to be on on Raw, or sometimes with Percy or Byron Saxton, there's be times where they don't talk for quite a while, and then they chime in, and I'm like, "Oh, right, who was that? What?" And it's like I forget they're there, and it's like I don't think that's a good thing. And I think either of the 2 women would do the job just fine, but again, it's that making history. When they opened the show, Michael Cole had to point out it's the first time ever 2 women at the booth. And I wish they would just do what's best, not what's never been done before.
All right, let's move on here to the main roster. We've got Hell in a Cell coming up. We've got Australia coming up. We've got the Evolution pay-per-view coming up. We've got this Mae Young Classic going on. We have Saudi Arabia, which may or may not be on the network. I'm thinking it's not going to be on the network. That's a lot of shows. And what the hell's my child doing? You hear that? Holy smokes.
I did not hear your child, but you stooged it off. But yeah, I'm finding it, I'm really disconnected with the main roster product today more than ever before. And I think part of it is burnout, that there's, again, 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown. I'm trying to keep up on NXT. I now have the Mae Young Classic that I'd like to watch. They're pushing Hell in a Cell. They're pushing Australia. And it's like, my God, I just can't keep up.
Hey, and at least they're only doing the Mae Young Classic 1 show a week. Can you imagine if they dropped 12 episodes or 6 episodes or whatever yesterday? You'd never watch them.
No, I still haven't watched the first Mae Young Classic because they dumped it all of a sudden, and I didn't have time to get caught up. I did watch the final, and then I watched the 2 Rachel Ellering matches because she asked me to for feedback. And had they dumped them again for binge watching purposes, I'd probably watch Rachel Ellering's matches again and catch the final at Evolution. But thankfully, they're going one at a time, so I'll have the chance to keep up. But it's just so hard to keep everything straight because they're building matches for 3 or 4 different shows at the moment. And I think you mentioned on Observer Live that you didn't get a single text, a single ounce of feedback on the first week of the Mae Young Classic. And I think part of it is a lot of people probably forgot it was even on because they're pushing Evolution, they're pushing Hell in a Cell, they're pushing the Super Showdown, and it's like they're building the women's matches for Hell in a Cell with Becky and Charlotte. They're building, is it the Bellas and Ronda tagging in Australia? And they're hyping all these other women's matches and the women's pay-per-view that I think the Mae Young Classic is just falling by the wayside, which I think is a shame because, as I mentioned, I really like the concept and I enjoyed the first show. You know, again, no, I hate using the term, but no 5-star matches, but you shouldn't in the opener. I'm hopefully going to enjoy it, but there's so much product that I'm getting burnt out. And I also find, too, on the main roster, there's so many characters that are either silly that I can't relate to or miscast or misbooked, babyface and heel-wise, that there's very few, if any, characters that I'm actually connected to and emotionally behind where I'm concerned or interested in where they're going. And I find when Monday and Tuesday roll around, it's, if I remember it's on, I'll watch it. If not, I catch it on DVR. But there isn't that what's happening next. And I think it's too much content.
Well, I did get 3 or 4 text messages about it here today, but still, as compared to everything else, seems like viewership is low. But we'll see. See how it does next week. Or over the weekend. Maybe people are going to wait till the weekend to watch it. I don't know.
Could be. Although on that front, I mentioned, babyface and heel. It's the Elias stuff the last 2 weeks has really got under my craw, if you will. It's something that I've been harping on for a while. Nobody seems to listen or agree with me necessarily, but with the women's evolution thing and really pushing, the equality and the empowerment, which I'm all for. I've been supporting women's wrestling forever. When they had Trish come out and smack Elias, it infuriated me. And I've mentioned this before on the show. If you allow the women to hit the men, but don't allow the men to hit the women, you're sending the message that women are weak and them hitting the men really doesn't matter. And I don't think that's the message you should be sending in a women's empowerment movement. I prefer hands off, everybody stick to their own gender, if you will, rather than having guys out there smacking women in the face. And just for an analogy, could you imagine if they did Raw in Calgary and Alexa Bliss was in the ring doing a promo and burying me and Calgary, and I came to the ring and hauled off and smacked her? Would the reaction have been the same?
Kidding me?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and the only reason it wouldn't be the same is me hitting a woman is worse than a woman hitting a man. And I think we should just not have either hit each other because domestic violence goes both ways. And I think it should just be avoided. Let the women compete with the women, give them an equal footing, an equal platform, and let the men compete with the men. And I think everyone would be better served.
For all of you that can hear that right now, apparently my child is downstairs chasing the laser with the cats. It's so loud. She is screaming. Holy smokes.
Oh, tremendous.
Anyway, so yeah. Hey, listen, it's just like last night. Like I was watching the Mae Young Classic, and I was reviewing it, and it did not get a particularly favorable review, nor did some of the women, nor some of the matches. And I just thought, you know what? I'm sure that I'm probably going to get it tomorrow from some people. Can't believe what I said about the Mae Young Classic, but listen. And actually, I didn't, so I was worried about that for nothing. But if you want equality, then the reality is I'm going to judge the women's wrestling and the women's shows exactly like the men's. And so if it sucks, I'm not going to sit here and grade it on a scale and say that it's better than it is. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about it, like I say exactly what I think about the men's matches. That's it.
Did you notice or care that in some of the women's video packages, they were intergender match clips that they were using?
Yeah, I did see that. Always
again,
the women doing something to a man.
Yes, but not the other way around.
Yes. And by the way, they just re-signed the mixed match challenge, so you're going to get more of these matches where the women can hit the men, but not vice versa. And I don't want to see the men hit the women.
Yes,
I agree with Lance. Have the women work with the women, have the men work with the men. Done. That's equality.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that great Taker Shawn segment so we can have something we loved.
What about the Bellas? Before we finish up with the women. The Bellas are on both shows. Makes no sense.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me, and it's not, this is not an indictment of either Bella, but the story that they've been telling of this evolution is back in the Dark Ages when they were called divas. They've come out of the Dark Ages. They're no longer divas. They're, women's, female superstars. They're empowered women, because back when the women's division sucked, it was the divas division. And then they bring back the stars of Total Divas. And this is where I'm not, because the Bellas are not by any way, shape, and form the worst women workers on the roster. They've come a long way over the last few years. But to me, the story they've been telling is Divas era bad, women's era good, to bring back the two most associated women with the Divas era, to feature them again in a prominent role, especially doing both brands. I don't think that's a good message.
Well, I mean, the idea is going to be that the Bellas are heels. You're supposed to dislike these two divas coming back.
Aren't they tagging with Ronda?
Well, I mean, for the time being, but it's probably going to be Nikki and Ronda at the pay-per-view, which is coming up in October.
Bria's tagging with Daniel Bryan, leading the crowd in enthusiastic chants.
Well, I mean, you got Trish Stratus coming back. I mean, she was definitely not part of this new era. I mean, you'll have Lita back and these other girls. I mean,
but Trish was never painted as the Divas era. She was a WWE Women's Champion. There was a period in the middle, and I'm not even trying to indict that whole period between when Trish, Jazz, and Lita ended and the Divas belt came in, and then there was whatever that 5-year period. There was some really good women in there. But the story they've been telling is that era is a different era. And if you wanted to bring back the Bellas with the promo, and actually Maria's actually been doing this on Twitter. I don't know if it's an angle or a shoot, but she's been on Twitter defending the Divas era and saying she would like them to bring the Divas belt back. It's like, if the Bellas were doing that, then I'd be like, okay, I get this. We've got, almost an invasion, if you will, that the current roster of the Charlotte, Sashas, Rondas, and who have you are the new women's evolution. And you brought back the Bellas and Maria Kanellis and anyone else from that Divas era to say, you're shortchanging us. You're not better than us. You haven't evolved. You're just the latest thing. Then I could get into the feud. But it just seems like a backward step in the story they're telling.
Maybe that is the story they're telling. They just are biding their time, since we have until, what is it, mid-October? What date is that? Let's find out. They got a while. So maybe, I mean, I'd be surprised if Maria were just saying something like that without that being something they've talked about as a potential storyline. October 28th. They got 2 months before that pay-per-view. They have plenty of time to build that story. I don't know if they will, but they could.
Yeah, I would prefer it if they did, because starting the story with the story I buy is what gets me interested. So we'll see where they go.
Shawn and Taker.
Yeah, this, and I loved this. And I think it's because I could believe it. And, you know, you and I have talked about this, you know, the attitude of, maybe it wasn't even just you, I was talking with several people about it, that there seems to be well, everybody knows it's fake, so let's not worry about it. And I'm so not in that camp. I know movies are fake. I want them to be good and realistic. And I want my wrestling to feel real. And I believe Shawn Michaels when he's talking. And as crazy as it is, the Undertaker of all characters, when he comes out, I believe him. I can suspend my disbelief. I don't believe he's actually dead, but I believe in that guy, and I believe he carries himself the way I expect him to. And
he never breaks character.
Exactly.
Except in the late 90s when he became a weird biker.
Or some of the weird... I saw a commercial once that he actually did in like 94, 95, and it was just like, what in the hell is this?
Yes.
But yeah, he protects his character and stays in it, and it's like, this felt like it had weight. There was teeth to it. And I'm really curious because I really got the impression that they were setting the stage for Shawn to come back. And to me, the key to the segment was Shawn putting over so heavily that I've turned down these millions of dollars. I've turned down the request of all these great fans out of respect for you. Because he lost the match to Taker, and he's honoring that stip out of respect for Taker, which to me sets the stage for if Taker gives him permission or challenges him to come back, then Shawn can. It's like I've honored the stip until the person who owned the stip told me I had honored it long enough. And I think it's a good face-saving method if you want to go back on that stip and have Shawn save some face. I think that's the way to do it. I think if Taker grants him permission or outright calls him chicken and says, don't worry about the stip, I'll just, retire you permanently so you rest in peace, come on back, then I think it opens the door for a Shawn comeback, which I like the idea of because Shawn is great, but it would be nice if someone one time in wrestling honored that retirement stip.
Well, this is from this week's Observer. The working idea internally right now is that Michaels is coming out of retirement. Right now it is not for a singles match, and it is targeted, if not scheduled, for Saudi Arabia on November 2nd, which may not even be on the network, because it's 4 days after the Women's Evolution show, and you can probably put two and two together and figure out that he's getting paid a preposterous amount of money for this match. I don't know how much. I know that Dave scoffed at the idea of $7.5 million, but they can afford to pay him $10 million. If they really want Shawn Michaels, his coming out of retirement match one time in Saudi Arabia, they'd pay that guy $10 million, and they can afford it. Saudi Arabia may chip in. I have no inside information. I think he's making like a ridiculous amount of money for this match.
Oh, I agree, but I think 2 might be more realistic than 7.5.
Lance, when I found out they were making like $58 million every year for 10 years to run 2 house shows in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, maybe he's getting 5.
I mean, dude, they're making $500 million over the next 10 years to run, what would it be? What's 2 times 10? 20 house shows. You kidding me? $500 million? They could pay this guy $10 million without even blinking.
Well, yeah, but I can't fathom one of the boys requiring that much to come back for one match.
Well, hell no, but here's my point. Dave mentioned this. I mentioned this on Observer Live. When Saudi Arabia wanted these shows, they had a list of guys that they wanted on the show. Yeah. One of them was Yokozuna, who's been dead for 2001, 2002 he passed away?
Yeah, they wanted Warrior too.
They wanted Warrior, who was dead, okay? So they wanted Shawn Michaels. And they've already done one show, and they didn't have Shawn Michaels. So, this is purely speculation on my point. They could have said, listen, if Shawn Michaels is willing to do this, we'll chip in $5 million on top of whatever you're going to pay this guy. We want him on the show. They have so much money. You may as well say we'll give him an extra $5. That's the kind of money we're talking about here. He didn't do the first show. He's doing the second show. You know they wanted him on that first show. I mean, do the math. He's making a shit ton of money for this show. He has to be.
Oh yeah, and God bless him if he can get it, take it. I'm not begrudging him coming back on his retirement because I'd go back on any stip ever for far less than that.
I mean, think about this. How much money do you think Brock made to stay after WrestleMania for 2 more matches? Allegedly, it was a ridiculous amount of money. One of those shows was Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, if he made $2 million, $5 million for that contract to stay through SummerSlam, and one of those matches was Saudi Arabia, and Shawn didn't get that kind of money to do the first show, guaranteed he's getting a huge payoff to do the second show. He ain't doing it for fucking WrestleMania.
Yeah. So are they going to do an angle with him reffing in Australia to set up the 3-way match so we can finally see the payoff to the secret plan?
Dude, you're going to see the payoff to the secret plan, Lance. You will see it. He is advertised as referee for that match. 8 years in the making.
I just hope there's a Saudi prince somewhere that's a mark for Lance Storm.
Hey, I'm positive there's one out there.
Well, the thing is curious. It's like, will there be any Canadians on this show? Saudi Arabia and Canada is having a huge spat right now.
Well, we'll find out.
Canada came out outspoken against their current human rights issues, and Saudi threw all Canadian diplomats out of the country. And it's a big feud right now. So there's a chance that any of the Canadian boys on the show might not be allowed to go.
Well, they kept Sammy off the show for other reasons, so they very easily could say, we don't want no Canadians on this show. No Jinder. Even though he's supposed to be an Indian, he's Canadian. No Kevin Owens. No All Ego Ethan Page.
Wow, you really had to jump there to find more Canadians.
I did.
No Victor.
No Victor. Is he really from Canada? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's an Alberta boy.
How about that? How about that? Impact this week.
Yeah, I don't watch it every week, but I try to watch it most. So I just thought, because I don't hear people covering it a whole lot, I'd give it a bit of a plug or review here. A lot of it, to be honest, isn't my cup of tea. There's a fair bit of silly, wacky characters, like Grado and so forth, and Eli Drake, who aren't my cup of tea, but I gotta say, I really like Austin Aries as the guy. They've got Killer Cross with him as a heavy, and again, it's aired, so it's not a spoiler. Moose just turned heel and is with them, and I do like a serious, more heavy edge to your main event, and they're doing that, and perhaps the lighthearted stuff underneath accents that, and maybe I'm judging the other stuff unfairly, but they've got Tessa Blanchard as their women's champion, who they're pushing really strong, and Aries as their top guy, I think does a really good job in that role. So while I don't like all of the show, I think there's a lot of really good, strong highlights to it. And if you haven't given it a chance since the new people took over, it's worth a look. Thursdays on Pop TV, Fight Network in Canada. But yeah, I guess it's like every wrestling show for me now. It's hit and miss, but the stuff that hits is pretty strong, and unfortunately the stuff that misses is pretty weak in my opinion. But again, that's not exclusive to just Impact.
One other thing before we get into some of the plugs here, we were talking about the injuries and such in professional wrestling, and I know that you were listening to Observer Live today, so any thoughts on that discussion?
Yeah, I'm concerned for many guys moving forward, and it's the generational conversation where the veterans tell the young guys to ease up. I remember Nick Bockwinkel telling me, I hope you live to be 30, kid. And I have lived to be 30. I'm actually getting very close to 50. But that said, my body hurts most days. And I worked a strong athletic style, but I don't think I was one known for taking crazy, insane, stupid bumps. I did some dives, but not a lot. I didn't do very many ladder bumps off cages, some of the more devastating stuff. And again, most days I hurt a little bit. Some days I don't hurt much at all, and I'm feeling great. Other days it's more than that. Hips tighten up and bother me on occasion. I've got a massage therapist that I go to regularly. My knees ache on occasion. My back is not great. But again, I still get in and bump and wrestle, and I feel pretty good most of the time. But I'm curious, those who have had already more surgeries and more major injuries than I had, how they're going to fare. And I am concerned. And that's too with the current product and the internet and YouTube. Back in the day, which is a common expression, we talk about the guys that had, took all the bumps. And, you talked about at All In, you saw a lot of veterans that were moving slow. They may have worked big on the big shows, but there was a lot of small shows that no one saw where guys took it easy. And now today with every match streaming and every match ending up on YouTube, I fear that people push the envelope on every single show now. And if you work more than 180 matches every 10 years, I'm curious how well your body's going to hold up. And I'm cautious and worried for many of the young guys that are not 30 yet and racking up the injuries. You mentioned, what was it that we watched? Oh, it was the Retro Raw with Christian taking that tight power bomb that, he retired young due to concussion. And, the TLC matches, which are famous and are great and everybody loves them. It's like Edge retired early. Christian retired early. Jeff is physically very, very beat up. Matt's dealing with like his pelvis fusing to his spine or something, and he's pretty physically beat up. I'm not sure the condition that Devon's in. He's an agent now. Bubba seems to be holding up quite well, but, Bubba wasn't generally the one taking the bumps off the cages. He took his fair share of good bumps, but he was a smart guy that picked his spot, so I don't know how he's feeling, but there's a lot of aches and pains and casualties in guys that perhaps didn't work as hard or as dangerous with apron bumps and floor bumps and ladder bumps and stage bumps that I hope everyone takes a step back and takes a look at their body and does think long term. Hopefully we'll all live into our 80s. Let's hope we're not all in our wheelchairs by 60.
I plan to go longer than that, dude. It's 2018, baby. 120.
You're going to 120?
That's
if
right.
If I can make it into my 80s, I'll be happy. Now, granted, when I hit 80, I'll probably be going, geez, I hope to make 100.
Dude, Granny's about to be 89.
Yeah, and Granny, I don't think, took a lot of apron bumps.
She didn't take a lot of apron bumps, but she delivered a lot of guilt in her career.
There you go, and those double chin chops.
Yeah, those. I like the leg chop yesterday. Or the foot chop, whatever she called it.
Or the double something or other.
Yeah, a lot of double something or others in that match. The best was 2 weeks ago when she goes, I just make a lot of this up.
She's smarter than us all. She really is.
Yes. All right, let's talk about some plugs here. I know you got a lot of stuff coming up. WrestleCade and more.
Yeah, this is my big weekend airport pickups. The 14th year of Storm Wrestling Academy starts on Monday. I've got, I think, 7 countries represented. Iceland being the new one that I've never had anyone from before. So big class starting on Monday. New classes again January, May, and September of next year. You can go to stormwrestling.com for information on the school. You can follow at Storm Wrestling Academy on Instagram. There'll be photos from the class. And as I mentioned, Dominic, Rey Mysterio's son, is going to be in this class. So occasional photo of him in there wrestling with me may show up now and again.
Hey, what's the weather like? Is there September, October, November? Is he going to get snowed in at some point here?
There's really no way to tell in Calgary. It was.
What are the chances?
There'll be some snow. I don't expect he'll be snowed in,
okay.
But he'll get some snow.
Yeah, we met Ray and Dominic at All In, and Ray was just like, this kid lives in San Diego. He doesn't know what he's getting into here.
Like, well, he needs to toughen up.
He'll toughen up all right up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell you that much.
Again, at Storm Wrestling Academy on Instagram. You can follow me at Lance Storm on Twitter. And yeah,
Lawrence?
Yeah.
You're IRS now?
Yeah, I'm joining the York Foundation.
That's right.
There's an old reference. At Lance Storm on Twitter. And again, yeah, WrestleCade weekend in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Or is it South Carolina? I think it's North Carolina. November 23rd through 25th. I'm there the Saturday. I don't do many appearances, so this is a rare one for me. So if you're interested, stop by WrestleCade and say hi to me. From all of the postings I see online, damn near the entire wrestling industry is going to be there, over 100 people. So come say hi at WrestleCade in November. And that's about all I've got going on at the moment.
Winston-Salem is, in fact, in North Carolina. If you're planning on going after the StarCast weekend, I want to go to WrestleCade, but I'm not going. But Lance is going to be there, everybody, so check him out at Lance Storm on Twitter. Check out the school. Go train with Rey Mysterio's enormous child. And get in the ring with Lance and give him a beating.
Learn how to work.
Yeah, learn how to work, everybody. That's a number one. You understand what I'm saying? That's a number one lesson if you're going to be a wrestler. Learn how to work. I feel like I got to say that because it's a lost art.
I've got a t-shirt going to that effect at prowrestlingtees.com/Lance Storm.
Oh, cool. All right, we're out of time, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll be back later on with more. I think myself and Filthy will be doing the UFC show tomorrow because Dave is in the UK. Got a couple of pictures of Dave in the UK up on my Twitter right now, at Brian Alvarez. Check those out. Check out video.f4wonline.com, and that's it. We'll talk to you again after a while.